Star Trek has not been a science fiction property for a long time now, and arguably not since this 1977 revamp of the franchise. Now, here's where we have to be careful because most people assume if this movie takes place in outer space, it must be sci-fi. If it takes place in the future, it must be sci-fi. And that isn't necessarily the case. Now let me explain. Science fiction is philosophical at its core. The stories are less concerned about interpersonal conflict than they are with ideas. Like, what might extraterrestrial life be like? What are the consequences of scientific innovation? And also, it's a futuristic lens to which we look at ideas of identity, morality, desire.
My oath of celibacy is on record, Captain.
And that age-old question, what is the meaning of life? What I find ironic is that Star Trek the Motion Picture came about as a shamelessly direct response to that other space film, Star Wars. Yet, of all the Star Trek films, it has the least in common with that other franchise. Star Trek 1966 and Star Trek the Motion Picture actually delivered on the original promise of the TV show to seek out new life forms and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. You get a little bit of this in subsequent films until J.J. Abrams comes in and straight up says, let's make it like Star Wars.
Because it was a more philosophical, sort of debate-driven show, I loved the action of Star Wars, and Trek never seemed to really have that.
And Star Trek 09, as much as I liked it, could almost be seen as JJ's audition tape for Star Wars 7. Real science fiction as a genre hardly ever shows up in feature films. The closest we usually get are modern updates of classic books by legendary sci-fi writers, like Isaac Asimov. But every once in a while, a real classic might pop up on Turner Classic Movies. You know the ones I'm talking about, and maybe you've even seen one or two of them. Films like Forbidden Planet, Robinson Crusoe on Mars, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and perhaps the most prestigious of all, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Films that dealt with ideas that were ahead of their time, things we still can't quite comprehend. And that's what these films did, caused us to think deep thoughts about where we have been, where we are going, and what is our place in the universe. And it was this mentality that led Gene Roddenberry to create the original Star Trek show.
If you read science fiction, the more you read it, the more you realize that you and the universe are part of the same thing. Science still knows practically nothing about the real nature of matter, energy, dimension, or time, and even less about those remarkable things called life and thought. But whatever the meaning and purpose of this universe, you are a legitimate part of it. And since you are part of the all that is, part of its purpose, there is more to you than just this brief speck of existence. You are just a visitor here in this time and this place, a traveler through it. All of this is how Star Trek began, and it's also something of what it's about. I am an alien, and so are you. And yet, and this is the loveliest thing of all, somehow we're also part of each other and part of everything that is.
What I like about Star Trek the Motion Picture is how unapologetically sci-fi it is. It's an idea-driven film that strikes a chord deep inside those who watch it, best summed up in the scene where Spock contemplates the theme of the film.
Each of us, at some time in our lives, turns to someone, a father, a brother, a god, and asks, why am I here?
Very religious subtext for Gene Roddenberry, who was not a religious man. But more on religious subtext later. Before Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, there was already an effort to restart the franchise, not as a feature film, but as another TV show, Star Trek Phase 2, which would phase out Leonard Nimoy, who no longer wished to be a part of the franchise, with a new Vulcan character named Zahn, who I believe makes a cameo in the motion picture. The ultimate basis for this new film was taken from the pilot script of the first episode of Phase 2 called In Thy Image. More on religious subtext later. Things really started to look up when film legend Robert Wise was brought on board as the director after his wife, who had been a fan of the show, talked him into it. Wise got his start working with Orson Welles. He edited a small film you might have heard of called Citizen Kane. But he's probably the most famous for
The hills are alive with the sound of music.
It was Robert Wise who convinced the reluctant Leonard Nimoy to return to the franchise. And the final piece of the puzzle, the man who brought a soul to the crazy futuristic world and its abstract concepts, Jerry Goldsmith, the master composer in what might be considered his finest moment, creating this little masterpiece. Everyone involved did an incredible job despite having an extremely rushed production schedule. This film ended up being something revolutionary. Not only were the effects better than Star Wars, but they rival many of the special effects you see in today's films. Now, some people go too far and argue that Star Trek the Motion Picture is an effects film only that overlooks the storyline and characters. This couldn't be further from the truth. It does an especially good job on examining Admiral Kirk's character and his inner transformation. At the start of the film, Kirk is lost on the Enterprise. He feels inadequate, but is using his position to get what he wants.
You personally are assuming command?
I'm sorry.
No, Admiral. I don't think you're sorry.
It's like when your boss doesn't know what he's doing, so he micromanages to feel important. What he really wants, though, is to recapture the glory days of his youth. Through the film, we see this stubborn man learn to accept that he doesn't have all the answers, and there are still areas for him to grow. This ends up being the theme of the film, evolving yourself into a better person and leaving your past behind. If you haven't seen the film yet, you may want to turn back now. Kirk's transformation mirrors the transformation of V'Ger, the film's antagonist. The entity starts out as a petty, childish, and heartless machine, but decides to join with its creator so it can move beyond cold logic and experience emotion, love, and the human ability to leap beyond logic.
What does V'Ger want with the Creator?
To join with him,
To join with the Creator. How?
V'Ger and the Creator will become one.
This is where the religious subtext comes in. The creator joining with its creation in order to set them free from the bondage of the law.
I think we gave it the ability to create its own sense of purpose out of our own human weaknesses and the drive that compels us to overcome them.
Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but these are concepts that mankind as a species has been wrestling with for thousands of years, and it's something that doesn't really get addressed much in movies. Star Trek the Motion Picture can get away with it because sci-fi can act as an allegory, a futuristic prism in which we can view ancient concepts. Is this all that I am? Is there nothing more? Which is answered in the film's tagline, "The human adventure is just beginning," making the case that Gene Roddenberry originally set out to make. Also, as a side note, this film is really meant to be seen on the big screen. It's unfortunate that most who have seen Star Trek the Motion Picture saw it on their television set. This, I feel, absolutely undercuts the film's effectiveness. Watching it on the big screen, there are looks and exchanges between the actors that have so much impact, especially with an audience reacting. It really changes the experience. I really do love Star Trek the Motion Picture. The visuals, the music, the concepts. They don't make films like this anymore. All the reason to cherish this, the first entry in the Star Trek film franchise.
Let me do what we always try to do on Star Trek. Hopefully entertain you, perhaps even make you laugh a couple of times, and when your guard is down, slip in a heavy idea or two. Because science fiction is a remarkable device for looking at the human creature and into the human condition. Science fiction may be one of the last places in our society where the philosopher can roam just as freely as he chooses.